statistician by trade, but I also trained as a therapist when I was young. So I've sort of got this mixture between soft people skills and harder statistical ones. So maybe that's why I become the guy that does stats about happiness, particularly at the moment about happiness at work. You may know me from my work on the Happy Planet Index. I did a TED talk on that back in 2010. This is not a talk about the Happy Planet Index, but actually there is a new one out this week. So you can go to happyplanetindex.org and find all about that out about that. This is a talk about my current work, which is about work. And I'm writing a book at the moment, which is entitled this, Happiness is a Serious Business, because that's my very strong belief that happiness is a serious business. But of course, it can be difficult to juggle work and our happiness and our well-being in life. And I often think of it a bit like this image. This is an archetypal image that comes right back from Plato of a charioteer with two horses, two headstrong horses, putting them in different directions. Work and life can feel a bit like that, pulling us in two different directions. However, we want them to pull in the same direction. Actually, work is really good for our overall well-being. This is a graph I've just recently drawn. It's using the work of someone called Professor Francis Green from the University College London in the UK. And he's looking at the relative effect sizes of different things that impact our well-being. So the first one here is age, which is it's well known that being middle-aged isn't great for happiness. They talk about a U-shaped curve of happiness. And it's there in the data, but really notice it's a really small effect. So don't think the age is the main thing that drives happiness or unhappiness in life. Bigger factors are the ones we traditionally think about: income, education, whether you're married. You can see they're about twice as large as that age effect. The blue means they're positive impacts. The yellow means they're negative. But then I want to give you three about work. Look how much larger they are. So first one is being unemployed. Terrible for our happiness and well-being. Over 3 or 4 times the effect of just the loss of income itself. The next two are about the quality of our jobs. So the big, long, yellow negative one is having a really bad job, being in the lowest 10% of jobs. This data is from Europe, the USA, and actually South Korea too, but they're using the same data sets. So bad jobs are really bad for us, and then good jobs are really good for us. You can see that they're about 3 times as important as income. So having a great job is good for us. It's good for us, and I'm going to show it's good for the employer. The final one is health. Health is always a big predictor of well-being, and you can see I rebased everything to make health 100, but you can see that jobs are in the same sort of level of impact as our health. So they're very, very important. If you want to be happy in life, make sure you're happy in work. Best lesson, really. So happiness is a serious business for you, but it is also for the business. And this charity we can think about as the balance inside a business, about the balance between productivity, meeting business goals, and the happiness and well-being. So if you're a team leader, you can often feel pressured from above and also from below. You're getting pressure from below from your team, and you get caught in this trap between their well-being and the business goals you have to meet. It could be individually too, but there's always these pressures going on. Now, what I want to say is that I think that great teams, and indeed great work, is about being happy and successful. There's lots of really waffly definitions of great teams, but mine's very succinct. Great teams are happy and successful. Now, I've got 2 variables there. I'm a statistician. I'm going to start splitting them up. So you can think about teams that are unhappy or happy, low performing or high performing. This is where great teams are, happy and high performing. You want to be there. You don't want to be here. Miserable teams. Nobody wants to be there. But we've got 2 empty quadrants there, and they're interesting. The top left could be called coasting teams. They're happy, but they're not really performing. If you're a senior leader, you might call them slacking teams. They're really not working hard. So, that's actually what senior leaders worry about, that if they're going to promote happiness at work, they're just going to have slacking and coasting. What they've actually got a lot more of is in the bottom right quadrant, which is burning out teams that are unhappy or just okay, but then they're high performing, but they're sort of driving business results, but they're driving people out of the business too. So that's what that bottom quadrant is. In my data, I find 3, 4 times as many teams in that bottom right quadrant as the top left one. So it's a big problem for businesses. But the aim is to get everyone to have great work, being great teams. And actually, even if you're in a coasting team, you're coasting at work, it's better for you to be great because you're less likely to get made redundant and so life will be better over the long run. And that's the place to be. So I want to do a little thought experiment now, and think about a time when you were happy at work. And I mean genuinely happy, that you really enjoyed your work. You were a good fit, if you want. Happiness is partly a measure of fit. Using your strengths, getting along with people. I imagine you felt really motivated and you were doing a great job. Okay, now put that aside for a second and take a moment to think about when you were unhappy at work. I hope it's not now. Most of us have at least had a bad period of work when we're unhappy, and it's not great. In fact, we're probably motivated there too, but we're not motivated to do the job. We're motivated to leave the job. When we're unhappy, we're much more likely to leave. I'll show you some data on that in a bit. Then there's a third category where we're just okay. It's okay. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's okay. There's not so much motivation, and you're probably not doing your best work if you're only okay. Maybe it's a bit boring, or the people are only okay, or you don't really believe in the mission of the business. But okay sort of isn't okay. We've got these 3 different categories, and now I'm going to put some numbers on them about actually how much value they have. And I think of this as about solving 2 major pain points for organizations. So productivity, particularly low productivity, and staff turnover, particularly when it's too high for an organization. So let's look at the typical value by an employee over time. This is time. This is the value added. And the graph is going to have a shape something like this. It starts before the employee joins the business because there's a cost in recruiting them. They don't immediately jump up to speed. It takes some time. So there's a time till it crosses the x-axis. Approximately about a year on average in the UK is considered before an employee really starts paying back. So you want to get those recruitment processes working well. But it also depends how much value they add on how happy they are. You've basically got 2 lines that look a bit like this, that the happier employees are always adding more value. They're more productive, at least 10% more productive, and the unhappy are less productive, at least 10% less productive. So you get this sort of splaying out, which means that at every point in time, the happy employees adding more value. You can see that they get to break even quicker, whereas the unhappy one gets slower. But this is average tenure in the UK and the US. It's about 5 years, median tenure. It's shorter for younger people. It's longer for older people. It's shorter for people in some sectors like hospitality. It's longer in some sectors, particularly public sector, much longer. But the median is about 5 years. And you can see by that time, the happy employee is adding a lot more value. But that's not the whole story, because tenure is affected by happiness levels. This is a graph from a large global survey I did of 22,000 people across 7 nations. It was with Robert Half, the recruitment agency. And you can see that the unhappy people say they're much more likely to leave than the happy people. So that affects tenure. So when you go to this graph and you draw it, well, this is the okay employee. They're staying an average of 5 years. That's the value they add. Going to call that base level 1. You then got the happy employees who are adding a lot more value over a longer period of time. So the value they add is about 2.2 times the base level. But then what about the unhappy employee? Hardly any value. 20% of the value of the okay employee, a tenth of the value of a happy employee. This is a very big effect. Happy employees are worth a lot to organizations. And this is why I think we should think about happiness and success, particularly team happiness and success. And we should start, thinking about it more carefully. And really, what I'm saying is that happiness leads to success, leads to more dollars, if you like. Now, there's also, that's why the arrow is going that way, but there's also an arrow the other way, which is that success also builds happiness. So you've got here a sort of virtuous cycle going on. The dotted line is, I've drawn weaker deliberately because the effect size is about half. So it's about twice as strong from happiness to success as from success to happiness. But you can open up a virtuous cycle and we can start defining what these successes are. I talk about there being 7 successes of happy teams. So the first one is collaboration. Happier teams are twice as likely to collaborate. More creative, people in a good mood are 4 times as more likely to come up with an innovative solution. Unhappy employees are 3 times more likely to leave, so there's higher retention if you're happy. Your happy employees will be brand advocates for you. They will shout and go, I love working at this company, come and join us. People will want to work for you if you've got a happy culture. Unhappy employees have twice as many sick days, also more likely to be burnt out. Higher productivity, over 20% more productive, does vary a lot between sectors and roles. And there's even evidence that organizations with great cultures have extra share price growth, about 3% every year. So that's going to accumulate up. So happy teams, happiness is really worth a lot to the organization. I just want to go into more detail about the relationship between happiness and productivity. I'm going to use one study which is about sales. It's from Oxford University. Jean-Emmanuel Deneve, if you know him, very good researcher from Oxford, professor, led this research. And what they looked at was British telecom call centers. So BT is like our national, they're no longer nationalized, but they're the telephone, the biggest telephone internet service in the UK. This is their call centers. They've got 11 call centers in the UK. They were tracking the call operators there who were dealing with sales. So 90% of their calls are inbound. There's no prospecting. They're not creatively trying to find leads, just dealing with what's coming in. Presumably the 10% is callbacks or something like that. And they measured happiness weekly and they looked at the effect on sales. So this was a question they used. How happy did you feel this week? An answer from happy to very unhappy. And they tracked the sales. And what they found was that the happier operators were selling more, 13% more. They even sold more. If they were unhappy one week and happy the next week, they sold more. So the internal happiness to sales relationship worked as well as a cross-sectional one. They were happier and they sold more, but why? Why were they selling more? It's a good question. And they looked at the different types of calls that people were doing. So there was simple order taking calls. There were more complicated contracts for TVs and internet. And then there was recontracting, often with unhappy customers, okay, disgruntled ones, the hardest type. So notice there's an increasing complexity to these calls. What do they find? Well, they found that for the routine calls, there was absolutely no impact of happiness on sales. None. They're just calling in, can you take my order? Yes, done. The contracts, there was some, and for the negotiated and for the difficult customers, there was a big effect. And what that means is that feeling positive is helping us deal with complexity. The positive call operators could go off script, literally going off script. They could see the customer's point of view. It's called mentalizing, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. They could de-escalate situations that were difficult. They could problem solve for the customer and they could find a solution for them, make a sale. That's collaboration in action. And in fact, if we look at the 7 successes, they're better collaboration with the customer, they're more creative, and they're higher productivity, and they're making more sales. So they're hitting 3 of those 7 successes with their mood. And there's such a small thing. It's that, their phone, their voice on the phone, that's all that's going on here. But they're ticking these boxes. And so this dynamic models, this is the relationship between happiness and success, but we also need to look at the drivers. What's driving happiness in teams? And I call it the 5 ways to team happiness. There's also a feedback here, by the way, because if you're happier, you can do these 5 ways better. But these 5 ways are connect, be fair, empower, challenge, inspire. They're actually very similar constructs we find in psychology everywhere. I name them so that they're friendlier, more easy to pick up positive actions. But, connect is relatedness. Be fair is about justice. Empower is about autonomy. Challenge is about development, mastery, Daniel Pink would call it. Inspire is about meaning and purpose. Just make the language easier to understand. And actually, if you want to see how they work, you can do a free happiness test that I've designed. Just 5 minutes, and you get a personalized report, and it will benchmark all of your scores. So you can go to friday1.com and you can do that for free. So go and check out how happy you are, or send it to someone, friend of yours who isn't very happy, because it will help them stop making the same mistake if they're changing jobs next time. Now, going to the whole business, what gets measured gets managed. Happiness is valuable. It adds a lot of business value, but you need to measure it. So I suggest to every client or organization I come across, or anybody who I can bore, that you need to create a happiness KPI for your business. But you don't only need to do that, you need to have a systematic process in that helps use that measurement. So it's no good just measuring and watching it. So I talk about systematically building happy and successful teams. And I call this methodology measure, meet, repeat. And it goes like this. It's in a cycle: measure, meet, repeat. So the measure starts with asking people this question: how happy were you at work this week? People can click. They can also go and share some text around what was a success for them, anything they're frustrated. So you sort of got friction and flow. We also ask people to thank each other because there's not enough resonance of positivity in teams. But it's a very brief 2-minute survey on a Friday. That's why my business is called Friday Pulse. Inevitably, weekly happiness is going to fluctuate. Your team isn't going to be happy all of the time. It's going to go up and down. It's how quickly you bounce back. This team have obviously had a major setback over the last month, but you can see they're getting back into the green. Resilience is the shape of the curve. And if you've got this data every week, you can respond to any problems there are. Meet is about having a start the week meeting. It doesn't have to take long, it can take 10 to 15 minutes to just, go, how was last week? What's gone well, what hasn't? You can do it without the measure, but the measure really reinforces it and really drives a meeting like that because it helps you track it and see the ups and downs. And then you repeat. You have to make it a habit, a repeated habit, for it to start impacting teams' happiness at work. This is a team that had been using Friday Pulse for 6 months, and the team leader came in, he knew they were inheriting a very unhappy team. You can see they were in the red at the beginning, but over time, they built up the break for Christmas. That's why there's a few measurement points missing, into where I think they should be, which is green, sometimes yellow, but normally green. That's the right sort of zone to be in. It takes time. These things don't happen overnight. We also, to complement the happiness KPI, create a deeper dive. So this is using the 5 ways, the 5-minute questionnaire that I've already flagged to you. And organizations, review the results. This acts more like a diagnostic. First one acts a bit more like, here's how we are. It's tracking it. This is going into why it's happening. And you start getting reports, about how you're doing on your scores for Connect, Be Fair, Empower, Challenge, Inspire. Teams can brainstorm about how they can improve their results. You get heat maps for the whole organization. If someone's got security rights at the top, they can see how every team is doing and how they're doing on all of them. And it helps identify if there's systematic error, things going wrong across the organization, or if it's within team, what's going wrong. Both of those can happen. So my aim with my work is really to help to get these horses to pull in the same direction, that you can pull your chariot with your 2 headstrong horses where you want to go. It's to be happy and successful at work and indeed in life. So just to summarize the talk, good jobs support overall well-being. Great teams are happy and successful. Happiness at work adds value. Unhappiness destroys it. The 7 successes of happy teams. The BT study showed how feeling good helps us deal with complexity. Introduced the dynamic model of team happiness with the 5 ways to team happiness and the free questionnaire at friday1.com. What gets measured gets managed. Create a happiness KPI for your organization. Track team happiness. Be systematic and particularly team focused. That's the right place to intervene. Measure, meet, repeat. Friday Pulse can help. Thanks very much for listening. You can contact me, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. You can contact me directly by email if you've got questions at nick@fridaypulse.com. I hope you have a great rest of your